When mother-in-law meets daughter-in-law. The ultimate showdown. Short. Thanksgiving dinner had barely started when David casually asked, "Mom, did you enjoy the lake house I gave you?" My heart froze, confusion hitting like an ice storm as I realized I never received anything. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, smiled a little too knowingly, her eyes hiding something, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The table, filled with laughter and clinking glasses, suddenly felt heavy, oppressive, like a trap I didn't know I had walked into. I gripped the edge of my chair, my mind racing, recalling every struggle of the past 2 years while they thrived in luxury, and a quiet fury began to simmer. Every subtle gesture from Victoria now screamed deceit, every laugh a warning. I leaned back, pretending calm, while inside I plotted my next move, knowing the showdown had only just begun and that the real confrontation would leave everyone stunned. But for now, the truth hovered like a shadow, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Mom, have you been enjoying the lake house I bought for you?" David asked, his smile casual, but my chest tightened instantly as confusion flooded through me. I blinked, trying to make sense of his words. Lake house. I had never received anything like that. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, stood beside him, her expression carefully neutral, but with a subtle hint of something that made my skin crawl. The smell of roasted turkey filled the kitchen, the scent of pumpkin pie mingling with it, yet the warmth of the holiday was gone, replaced by a cold weight pressing down on me. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, cleaning every corner of my modest home, polishing silverware, setting the table with my finest china, hoping for a peaceful family gathering. For years, I had managed on my small savings and part-time janitor job, never complaining, always counting on the little joy family moments brought. And now, here it was, Thanksgiving, a day that should have been filled with laughter and comfort, tainted by a question that should have been a blessing. I forced a polite smile, masking the unease coiling inside me like a spring ready to snap. David continued, talking about the West Coast expansion of his business, mentioning renovations planned for their apartment, and I nodded, attentive but internally reeling. My mind raced through memories of bills I had delayed, lunches I had skipped, the winter coats I had worn until they were threadbare, all while his family lived in comfort, seemingly unaware of the sacrifices I had made quietly. I watched Victoria subtly adjust her necklace, her fingers brushing over the gold pendant in a way that suggested control, ownership, something unspoken yet unmistakable. She spoke in measured tones about their European trip, the renovations, the places they had visited, all while David occasionally glanced at me, unaware, trusting, perhaps, that everything was fine. And then, as I reached for the pumpkin pie, David leaned back, smiling warmly, and asked again about the lake house. My hands froze, the silver server trembling slightly under my grip. I searched his eyes, hoping to find a hint of jest, a misunderstanding, anything, but found only certainty. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes glinting, and the room seemed to contract, the air thick with tension. I took a slow breath, reminding myself to stay calm, to think clearly. I had lived decades understanding people, reading subtleties, noticing the flicker of an expression, the hesitation in a tone. This was no accident. My heart pounded as I quietly analyzed every word, every gesture, the inconsistencies stacking into a pattern I could not ignore. For the past 2 years, I had scraped by, saving every dollar for essentials, rationing medicine, and still managing to show up, to be present, to care, and yet here was the evidence of a truth I had not been told, a reality manipulated behind my back. My fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles white, as I plotted my next move in silence. I would not confront rashly, not yet, but I would watch, learn, and prepare. Every smile they gave me, every polite word, every seemingly harmless remark would be observed, logged, and remembered. The warmth of Thanksgiving was gone, replaced by a simmering awareness, the first spark of a strategy that would eventually bring the truth to light. And as the conversation continued, laughter still echoing faintly around the room, I understood that this dinner was only the beginning of a reckoning that would change everything. After the initial shock settled like a cold weight in my chest, I quietly excused myself from the table and wandered into the kitchen, pretending to check on the pies cooling on the counter. The sunlight streaming through the window felt strangely harsh, highlighting every scratch on the countertop and the worn spots in the floor where years of careful cleaning had left their mark. I paused for a moment, letting my mind drift to the last 2 years, when every penny had been meticulously accounted for, every bill paid with sweat and small sacrifices, while David and Victoria seemed to float in a world where money was abundant and concern for others optional. The contrast between their comfortable lives and my modest routine gnawed at me, but I kept my exterior calm, focusing on the simple tasks before me. I arranged the dessert plates, adjusted the forks, and poured the coffee, noting every small movement, every exchange of glances between David and Victoria at the dining room table. Each laugh and nod from them, each casual remark, carried an undertone I had not noticed before. I could feel a quiet storm building within me, not of anger, but of awareness, of clarity. The air was filled with the aroma of roasted vegetables and spiced apple cider, comforting on the surface, yet beneath it, tension thrummed like a low hum, threading through every corner of the room. I reflected on my years of dedication, of showing up, of providing love and support quietly, often unseen, unacknowledged. Those years had taught me patience, the ability to observe, to measure reactions, to notice what was left unsaid. I remembered late nights counting coins to cover an unexpected expense, the careful planning of holiday meals with only a fraction of what was needed, and the small joys of seeing family enjoy the moments I had created. Now, as I stood by the kitchen sink, listening to the muffled conversation and laughter in the dining room, I realized that all those skills, all those moments of quiet diligence, had prepared me to see through the subtle cues of deception. I could detect the tiny hesitations, the slight tightening of lips, the rapid glance exchanged across the table, and I cataloged each one silently. The warm light of the room highlighted the polished silver and gleaming plates, but it could not mask the growing tension, the unspoken truths hovering between us like fragile glass. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the heat steady my thoughts, and allowed myself a moment to plan, not for confrontation, but for understanding, for gathering knowledge before any action. Every word that floated to me from the other room was a clue, every gesture a piece of the puzzle that was slowly revealing itself. The world outside the window seemed calm, children playing in the yard, leaves drifting lazily to the ground, and yet inside, the quiet realization of betrayal and omission settled in me, sharp and precise. I would watch, I would wait, and I would ensure that when the moment came, I would act with the clarity and dignity that had carried me through decades of life, prepared to reclaim what had been overlooked, to illuminate the truth hidden in plain sight, while maintaining the calm exterior that would keep my family unaware of the depth of my understanding until the right time arrived. The sound of plates being cleared from the dining table echoed faintly through the house as I stepped back into the living room, careful to maintain a calm exterior while my mind raced with thoughts I could not yet voice. The golden afternoon sunlight spilled across the carpet, highlighting the subtle wrinkles in the upholstery and the small imperfections that spoke of years of careful living and attention, details I had meticulously maintained alone over the past months. As David chatted lightly with Victoria, sharing stories of his business expansion and upcoming meetings, I sat quietly on the sofa, absorbing every word, every tone, every glance exchanged between them, each one adding to the puzzle forming in my mind. The contrast between their effortless comfort and my careful planning and frugal routine was stark, almost painfully so, yet I allowed the calm to mask the storm gathering within me. Memories of long nights balancing bills, skipping small pleasures to make ends meet, and quietly sustaining our home while my son and his family thrived in luxury pressed against the edges of my consciousness. I noticed the way Victoria adjusted her scarf just so, how her eyes flicked toward David when she spoke, subtle signs that spoke louder than any words could. I let them speak, laughed at appropriate moments, nodded along, all the while cataloging every nuance, every hesitation, every carefully measured smile. The room seemed to hold its breath as if aware that something beneath the surface was stirring, an invisible thread connecting each action, each word, and each expression to a larger truth. I sipped my tea, the warmth anchoring my thoughts, allowing me to maintain poise, even as a quiet awareness grew that nothing about this gathering was coincidental. Every comment about renovations, every story about trips abroad, every casual remark about new purchases hinted at a life carefully curated without my knowledge or consent. My gaze lingered on the window, where the late afternoon light cast long shadows across the floor, reminding me that time and patience were allies, and that observation without rush could reveal more than confrontation ever could. I began tracing back through the past weeks and months, mentally reconstructing interactions, phone calls, and casual mentions, each one now taking on new significance. The calmness in my posture belied the strategic consideration forming in my mind, a plan that would require patience and precision, for the truths I sought were layered, subtle, and hidden beneath familiar faces and casual smiles. As I set down the empty cup, I resolved to continue watching, listening, and noting every small detail, for the moment of revelation, when all would be laid bare, would come in its own time, and when it did, there would be no mistake, no misunderstanding, only clarity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that preparation, observation, and steady resolve could turn the tide and restore what had long been overlooked. As the evening light softened, I moved to the window, tracing the outlines of the trees in the yard, letting my mind drift back over the months and the subtle patterns I had begun to notice. The house, usually filled with warmth during the holidays, now felt like a stage set, each room holding silent witnesses to conversations and gestures I had once overlooked. I recalled the countless evenings spent preparing meals for my family, the careful budgeting to ensure everyone had what they needed, and the quiet satisfaction I had felt when my efforts brought smiles and comfort. Now, those memories were tinged with a new awareness, a recognition that some smiles were practiced and some words were carefully chosen to conceal motives I had not yet fully uncovered. I thought of the small inconsistencies, the details that had initially seemed insignificant, the way Victoria answered certain questions with a pause too long, the way she subtly guided the conversation away from certain topics, the brief glance exchanged with David that carried unspoken meaning. Each moment now felt like a piece of a puzzle, fitting together to reveal a picture that had been hidden in plain sight. I took a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the fading sunlight on my hands, and let my thoughts settle. It was not anger that I felt, but clarity, a precise understanding of the landscape I now navigated. I recalled my own resilience, the strength built over years of managing challenges quietly, without complaint, and the determination to approach the situation with care, observation, and patience. I reflected on the subtle power that came from understanding, from noticing what others failed to see, and from keeping intentions private until the moment was right. My gaze wandered across the room, noting the placement of furniture, the lines of sight from one seat to another, the way sound carried from the kitchen to the dining room, each factor a potential advantage in the careful orchestration of what was to come. I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, recognizing that knowledge was accumulating in my favor and that each observation brought me closer to clarity and action. There was a rhythm to the household, a sequence of motions and routines, and by watching, listening, and cataloging these small details, I began to see the patterns of behavior, the underlying intentions, and the subtle orchestration of events around me. The evening deepened, shadows stretching long across the floors, and with each passing moment, I felt a growing sense of control, a calm certainty that the truth would be revealed not through confrontation alone, but through the careful assembly of evidence, the patient observation of habits, and the strategic timing of action. And as the house quieted, with only the soft hum of the heater and the distant sound of cars on the street, I resolved to continue watching, gathering, and understanding, knowing that the path to clarity and resolution required both patience and attentiveness, and that the evening held the potential for the first real steps toward uncovering what had been hidden. The next morning, I quietly made my way to the home office, the soft hum of the heater accompanying my careful steps across the hardwood floor. I pulled out the folders I had collected over the past weeks, receipts, bank statements, and copies of property deeds, placing them neatly on the desk. The sunlight streamed through the window blinds, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily in the warm light, each one a tiny reminder of the stillness that allowed me to think clearly. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth ground me as I began reviewing each document with meticulous attention, comparing dates, amounts, and signatures, noting discrepancies and subtle changes that had previously gone unnoticed. Every entry that did not match expectations raised a small flag in my mind, a breadcrumb leading toward a larger understanding of what had transpired. As I cross-referenced the statements, I realized that certain transfers and renovations David had mentioned were not only unrecorded in my name, but were directed to accounts and entities I had never authorized, subtle manipulations hidden within routine transactions. I felt a quiet satisfaction in uncovering these inconsistencies, knowing that each discovery brought clarity and prepared me for the steps to come. I recalled the long years of careful management, the evenings spent balancing ledgers and tracking expenses while maintaining the home, the discipline and patience that had shaped my approach to challenges. All of it now became invaluable, a skill set that allowed me to see patterns, recognize omissions, and interpret intent without confrontation. The room was quiet except for the soft scratch of pen on paper as I took notes, each notation building a picture of the truth, a silent narrative that connected events, gestures, and transactions across time. I thought of the holiday dinners, the celebrations, and everyday interactions that had once seemed ordinary, now revealing themselves as threads in a tapestry of subtle manipulation. Victoria's careful smiles, David's offhand remarks, the casual mentions of projects and trips, all took on new significance, clues that had been hidden in plain sight, but were now illuminated by the careful review of evidence. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, stretching my shoulders and glancing out the window at the crisp autumn air, the leaves shifting in patterns that mirrored the careful arrangements of my observations. Each realization reinforced my sense of control, a growing confidence that patience, attention, and measured action would allow me to navigate this situation with dignity and precision. I closed the last folder gently, the stack of papers now a map of understanding and preparedness. I felt the quiet power of knowledge settling over me, a steady calm that contrasted with the turmoil of the past weeks, and I knew that the next steps would be deliberate, strategic, and guided by the clarity I had painstakingly achieved. With the documents in order and the patterns of behavior understood, I could now plan the careful approach that would ensure the truth was recognized, not through haste, but through meticulous preparation and quiet, undeniable evidence. By mid-morning, I had gathered all my notes and documents into a single, organized stack on the kitchen table, each piece meticulously labeled and cross-referenced, the evidence of weeks of quiet observation finally tangible before me. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, letting the aroma fill the small room as a grounding ritual, and sat down with a calm focus that belied the storm of realizations coursing through my mind. Each bank statement, property deed, and transaction record told a story, a subtle manipulation carefully orchestrated, and as I reviewed them, the patterns became undeniable. Victoria's careful omissions and David's casual misstatements revealed a coordinated effort to keep me uninformed, a deliberate construction of false narratives to obscure the truth. I traced every transaction, every mention of renovations, every discussion about gifts and property, assembling a mental map of control and misdirection. The realization brought no immediate anger, only clarity and a sense of empowerment I had not felt in months. I could see that my prior patience and attention to detail had been necessary preparation for this moment, equipping me to act not impulsively, but strategically. I planned each step mentally, considering what I would need to do to reclaim oversight of the matters that were rightfully mine, aware that timing, precision, and discretion were paramount. I reflected on the quiet strength cultivated over decades, the ability to maintain dignity in the face of oversight and neglect, and recognized that it was now my greatest advantage. The soft hum of the heater and the occasional chirp from the birds outside became a background rhythm to my thoughts, reinforcing the sense that I was fully present, fully attentive, and fully in control. I considered contacting a trusted attorney to review my findings and confirm the extent of my rights, ensuring that any actions I took would be backed by clear documentation. Each discovery built on the previous one, the pieces fitting together into a coherent picture that left little room for doubt. I imagined the upcoming interactions with David and Victoria, the conversations yet to be had, and the careful manner in which I would reveal my understanding, balancing firmness with composure. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the table, highlighting the crisp papers and the neat handwriting, emphasizing the clarity that had emerged from weeks of patient observation. I allowed myself a brief, quiet satisfaction, the sense of control, the understanding that knowledge was now on my side, and that the subtle manipulations and omissions would not succeed unchecked. I was ready to proceed, armed with insight, evidence, and the patience to allow the right moment to arrive, knowing that the unfolding of events would be deliberate, measured, and guided by the clarity and precision I had cultivated, ensuring that the truth would ultimately emerge fully and without ambiguity. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the living room, I remained seated with the documents neatly arranged on the coffee table, each page a silent testament to the truths I had uncovered. I allowed myself to reflect quietly on the past, the years of managing the household, balancing expenses, and maintaining the home with care and diligence, all unnoticed by those who now acted as if everything had always been theirs. The patterns of conversation, the casual remarks from David, the subtle guidance and occasional smirk from Victoria, all became more pronounced in my mind, revealing a network of omissions and careful misdirection. I thought of every small detail I had cataloged over the past weeks, every transfer of funds, every mention of renovations or property updates, each one carefully plotted and now fully understood. The awareness of the broader picture brought with it a calm determination, a sense that the patience I had cultivated over decades was now paying dividends. I considered the upcoming interactions, the moments when I would quietly assert my awareness and reclaim control, understanding that timing and discretion were crucial. I visualized conversations unfolding, my tone measured, my words precise, revealing just enough knowledge to establish authority while keeping the other side unaware of the full extent of my understanding. The room was quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the faint hum of the refrigerator, and in that stillness, I appreciated the clarity that had emerged. I reflected on my own resilience, the capacity to observe without reacting impulsively, to gather information and use it strategically, a skill honed through years of navigating subtle challenges and ensuring that my household ran smoothly even in the absence of recognition. Each document, each piece of evidence, was now a tool, a way to structure the forthcoming steps with precision and confidence. I traced my fingers along the neat edges of the papers, imagining the process of carefully presenting my findings to David and Victoria, establishing boundaries and clarifying responsibilities without unnecessary confrontation. The quiet afternoon provided the perfect backdrop for this mental rehearsal, allowing me to consider every possible response and to plan the sequence of actions that would reinforce my position. I felt a growing sense of empowerment, knowing that understanding and preparation were more effective than haste or emotion, that the knowledge I had accumulated would guide me to a resolution where fairness and clarity prevailed. As shadows lengthened across the room, I settled into the certainty that patience, observation, and careful planning were my allies, and that the unfolding of events would demonstrate the depth of my understanding and the strategic foresight that had been cultivated over years of careful living, ensuring that the truth would emerge fully when the right moment arrived. The following morning, I found myself standing at the window, watching the crisp fall air swirl leaves across the driveway, a gentle reminder of the passage of time and the subtle shifts that life quietly imposes. I carried the organized stack of documents to the study, placing them carefully on the desk and arranging each folder so that the evidence of every small discrepancy and omission was immediately visible. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, creating soft stripes of light across the hardwood floor, each one a visual marker of clarity that contrasted with the shadowy uncertainty that had filled the past weeks. I poured a cup of tea and took a slow sip, the warmth steadying my thoughts as I revisited the interactions and conversations from the previous day, noting the slight hesitations in Victoria's speech, the almost imperceptible tightening of David's jaw, and the subtle ways they attempted to redirect attention when certain topics arose. Each observation added another piece to the puzzle, reinforcing my understanding of the underlying intentions and giving me a quiet satisfaction that my patience and attention to detail had allowed me to see what others had assumed would remain hidden. I made notes meticulously, writing down times, phrases, and reactions, and began mentally mapping the sequence of events, understanding that the interplay between action and response, omission and inclusion, was as critical as the facts themselves. The quiet hum of the heater in the background provided a steady rhythm, a gentle anchor as I traced back through emails, bank statements, and property records, seeing patterns of control and subtle manipulation emerge in full clarity. I recalled the long years of managing household responsibilities, the careful budgeting, the nights spent reviewing every receipt, and realized that those experiences had been perfect preparation for this moment, providing the skills necessary to parse truth from deception with precision and patience. Each careful observation reinforced my sense of control. The knowledge that I had gathered would allow me to act deliberately, strategically, and effectively when the time was right. I reviewed the layout of the house, the line of sight between the kitchen and dining room, the way sound traveled across rooms, imagining how information might be revealed naturally through careful positioning and observation. The afternoon light continued to shift, lengthening shadows across the floor, and I felt a quiet confidence growing, knowing that the evidence was on my side and that clarity would guide my next steps. I allowed myself a small smile, recognizing the power of preparation, awareness, and strategic thinking, and I resolved to continue monitoring interactions, gathering insight, and building a framework that would ensure any revelations would be undeniable and presented with calm authority. Each movement of the clock, each soft noise from outside, was another marker in the unfolding plan, and I felt ready to proceed with precision, knowing that patience, diligence, and a keen eye for detail would ultimately bring the truth into full view and restore clarity and balance to the household. That evening, I positioned myself in the living room with the stack of documents at hand, every page carefully reviewed and arranged to capture the full scope of what had been happening beneath the surface. The golden glow from the table lamp cast a warm light across the papers, highlighting the careful handwriting and neat organization, evidence of meticulous planning and observation over the past weeks. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, leaves brushing against the window in a gentle rhythm, while inside, I allowed myself to reflect on the patterns that had become clear. Subtle redirections in conversations, small omissions in explanations, and moments when Victoria's carefully managed expressions revealed more than her words. Each detail reinforced my understanding of the sequence of events, the intentions hidden behind seemingly ordinary interactions, and the careful ways in which information had been withheld. I sipped my tea slowly, the warmth grounding me as I reviewed every line, every note, confirming connections and tracing the trail that had led to this moment. The calm of the house contrasted with the intensity of my focus, each realization sharpening my awareness and reinforcing the importance of timing, precision, and discretion. I recalled past holidays, family dinners, and quiet conversations, seeing now how small gestures, overlooked comments, and polite exchanges had been pieces of a puzzle that had only recently come together in my mind. I allowed myself to visualize how the coming days would unfold, considering the careful approach I would take, the words I would choose, and the manner in which I would reveal my knowledge to ensure clarity and fairness without escalating conflict unnecessarily. Each observation became a point of strategy, every document a tool, and every reflection an opportunity to refine my plan. The room remained still, save for the soft tick of the clock on the wall, marking time as I mentally rehearsed the sequence of actions that would restore understanding and balance. I traced the flow of information through the house, noting lines of sight and the potential for casual conversations to provide additional confirmation of intentions. The clarity of the evidence combined with the careful preparation allowed me to feel a quiet sense of control, a recognition that knowledge, patience, and observation were more powerful than confrontation alone. I imagined the upcoming moments with David and Victoria, the subtle testing of their reactions, and the measured ways in which I would assert awareness and reclaim oversight. Each scenario played through my mind with precision, considering their likely responses and my optimal countermeasures, reinforcing the confidence that had been building over weeks of careful scrutiny. The shadows grew long across the floor, the evening quiet deepened, and in that stillness, I felt ready. Ready to act with authority, ready to reveal the truths that had been obscured, and ready to ensure that the careful attention, patience, and strategic observation of the past weeks would culminate in a moment of undeniable clarity, setting the stage for the resolution that would eventually bring balance and understanding to the family dynamic.